Long before the first European ships sailed across the Atlantic, the land we now call the Americas was already home to millions of people. These first inhabitants are called indigenous peoples, and their history stretches back over 15,000 years, maybe even longer. Scientists believe they came from Asia, following herds of animals across a frozen land bridge called Beringia, which connected Siberia to what is now Alaska during the last ice age. These early humans were nomadic hunters and gatherers, moving with the seasons, learning the rhythms of the land, the rivers, and the forests. Over thousands of years, they spread across North and South America, adapting to deserts, mountains, plains, and tropical jungles. They were the first Americans, though they did not call themselves that. They identified with their tribes, their nations, and their families. Some of the most well-known civilizations developed in Mesoamerica, like the Olmec, the Maya, and later the Aztec, each building incredible cities, pyramids, and complex societies. In South America, the Inca Empire grew high in the Andes Mountains, creating roads, terraces, and agricultural systems that still inspire amazement today. In North America, diverse nations such as the Iroquois, Cherokee, Sioux, and Apache lived in forests and plains, hunting, farming, and trading, with rich spiritual and cultural traditions. These societies were deeply connected to the land, understanding plants, animals, and natural cycles in ways that allowed them to thrive for thousands of years. Yet, for all their achievements, their story is only the beginning of what would become the complex history of the people known today as Americans. This is the story of origins, of migration, and of human survival in a vast and diverse continent, long before the world knew of America's existence. Around the late 1400s, the world beyond the Americas became known to Europeans, who began exploring the unknown lands across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1492, a sailor named Christopher Columbus, sailing for Spain, landed in the Caribbean, believing he had reached Asia. Though he never reached the mainland of North America, his arrival marked the beginning of a new chapter in American history. Soon after, explorers from England, France, and the Netherlands arrived, seeking land, trade, and wealth. The English established Jamestown, Virginia in 1607, the first permanent colony in what would become the United States. In 1620, the Pilgrims arrived at Plymouth, bringing their families, religion, and a desire to start new lives far from Europe. European settlers brought with them new crops, livestock, and technologies, but also diseases like smallpox and measles, which devastated indigenous populations who had no immunity. Colonists established farms, towns, and trade networks, but their settlements depended heavily on forced labor and, later, the tragic introduction of African slaves. Life in the colonies was diverse. In the north, families fished, traded, and farmed small plots. In the middle colonies, communities were culturally mixed and relied on trade. In the south, large plantations grew tobacco, rice, and cotton with enslaved labor. Over time, these colonies developed their own identities, separate from Europe, shaped by the land, the people, and the harsh realities of survival in a new world. European colonization set the stage for dramatic changes, new cities, new economies, and a population that included indigenous peoples, Europeans, and Africans. This mixture of people, cultures, and histories would eventually merge to form what we now recognize as the American population. By the early 1600s, European colonies faced a labor shortage. Plantations and farms needed more workers than the local population could provide. In 1619, the first group of Africans arrived in Virginia, brought forcibly across the Atlantic in the brutal system known as the transatlantic slave trade. Over the next 2 centuries, millions of Africans were captured, sold, and transported to the Americas, enduring unimaginable suffering along the way. These enslaved people were forced to work on plantations growing tobacco, rice, sugar, and cotton, especially in the southern colonies. Despite the cruelty, African cultures survived. Music, language, food, religion, and traditions blended with European and indigenous practices, shaping the emerging culture of America. Enslaved Africans also resisted in many ways through work slowdowns, escapes, rebellions, and the preservation of cultural identity. The presence of African slaves created a new social structure in the colonies, establishing deep racial divisions that would affect American society for centuries. Slavery was not just a Southern institution, it influenced the economy, culture, and politics of the entire emerging nation. Over time, the descendants of Africans, indigenous peoples, and European settlers began to mix, even under circumstances of oppression, laying the foundation for the diversity that defines Americans today. African Americans contributed to building cities, farms, infrastructure, and communities, and their influence on music, language, cuisine, and culture is still central to the American identity. Understanding this chapter is essential. The story of Africans in America is not just one of suffering, but also of resilience, creativity, and lasting impact on the nation's character. Without this history, the full story of how Americans came into existence cannot be told, because it is the story of people from many continents shaping one nation. By the mid-1700s, the 13 British colonies in North America had grown into thriving societies, each with its own identity, economy, and traditions. Although they were still ruled by Britain, many colonists began to feel that they were different from the people living in England. Tension grew when Britain imposed new taxes on the colonies after expensive wars in Europe and North America. Colonists protested these taxes because they had no representatives in the British Parliament, giving rise to the famous phrase, "No taxation without representation." Conflicts increased, leading to events such as the Boston Massacre in 1770 and the Boston Tea Party in 1773, where colonists dumped tea into the harbor to protest British control. Britain responded with harsh punishments, and soon both sides were preparing for war. In 1775, the American Revolutionary War began. Colonists, now calling themselves patriots, fought against the powerful British Empire for their freedom. On July 4, 1776, the colonies declared independence from Britain through the Declaration of Independence, written largely by Thomas Jefferson. This document stated that all men are created equal and that people have natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, ideas that would shape America forever. The war lasted 8 long years, filled with battles, sacrifices, and foreign assistance, especially from France. In 1783, the United States won its independence, officially becoming a new nation on the world stage. After victory, the new country needed a system of government. Leaders gathered to create the U.S. Constitution in 1787, establishing the presidency, Congress, and the courts. George Washington became the first president, helping unite the states and guide the young nation forward. Although the new country celebrated freedom, it still faced deep issues, including the continued enslavement of millions of African Americans and the displacement of indigenous peoples. This early period formed the foundation of the American identity, a mix of ideals, struggles, cultures, and hopes that blended together to create something entirely new. By the early 1500s, the quiet land of the indigenous nations changed forever when strange wooden ships appeared on the eastern shores, carrying explorers from Europe. These newcomers, mainly from Spain, France, and England, came searching for gold, land, and trade, never imagining the world they were stepping into. At first, some indigenous tribes welcomed the visitors with curiosity, offering food, guidance, and knowledge about the land. But as more and more Europeans arrived, they began claiming land, building settlements, and expanding without permission. This led to years of tension, misunderstandings, and battles as indigenous people fought to protect their land, culture, and families. Over time, European settlements grew into large colonies controlled by their home countries across the ocean. The English colonies became the most powerful, spreading from north to south and transforming the land with farms, towns, and forts. By the 1700s, the colonists grew tired of British control, unfair taxes, and strict laws, and they began to demand freedom. In 1775, a Great War broke out, the American Revolutionary War, as the colonists fought for independence from Britain. With determination and the leadership of figures like George Washington, the colonies eventually won the war and declared themselves a new nation. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was written, boldly announcing the birth of the United States of America. After the war, the new nation slowly built its government, created laws, and expanded westward across the continent. This westward expansion brought new opportunities but also more conflict, as indigenous communities were pushed from their ancestral homelands. Throughout the 1800s and 1900s, America grew rapidly, becoming a land of inventions, industry, and people arriving from all over the world. Cities rose, railroads stretched across the country, and a new generation of Americans shaped the culture, ideas, and dreams of the nation. Though its history includes struggle, injustice, bravery, and change, every chapter helped form the America that exists today. And so, from the ancient indigenous civilizations to the rise of a powerful modern nation, this is how the people known as Americans came into existence. The story of America is still being written today, shaped by the many cultures, histories, and voices that now call the land home.